Welcome to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew, and joining me today is my favorite co-host,
Luna Lovegood.
Luna Lovegood. We're in a Harry Potter state of mind today, apparently. Could that have anything to do with your recent master's assignment?
It's nothing at all. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel offended by your remarks.
All right, we were going to talk about executive function disorders.
That's true.
Specifically, we were going to talk
I forgot about that.
we were going to talk about...
I'm not even lying. I totally forgot that's what we were talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
We were going to talk about task initiation problems.
Yes.
So why don't you fill us in on that, since you're becoming the resident expert in one of those issues?
On task initiation problems?
Yeah. As an executive function disorder.
You struggle to do things. You struggle to initiate a task, and it's not just like, it's not you being lazy, it's that your brain doesn't trigger the process, and you lack the pathways that most people have that are automatic. People with executive functioning are lacking those pathways.
Executive functioning disorder.
Yes. Sorry. People who have executive functioning have the pathways. Those of us with the disorder struggle with that. And so then things like initiation becomes very overwhelming because you really don't know how to start.
You should probably take a step back and explain what executive functioning is. So executive functioning is your higher order thinking and your task initiation, your planning, your ability to plan, your ability to look forward into the future and anticipate what's going to happen. And you're wildly Googling there to get the technical definition, because that's how you deal with things. What is the technical definition of executive functioning?
The higher level cognitive skills you use to control and coordinate your other cognitive abilities and behaviors.
So basically what I just said.
But not.
But not those exact words, so I wasn't exactly right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you have things like autism or ADHD, or what are some of the other executive functioning disorders that you're aware of?
You're putting me on the spot, and I struggle with executive functioning, so this is troubling for me. Because I was on a different pathway of where this conversation was going, so you need to...
Oh God, where are you taking the conversation?
I was just thinking of like some of the skills that you struggle with, because it's not just task initiation, right? It's planning, it's time management, it's metacognition and self-control and working memory, and your flexibility in doing things. And I don't think a lot of people realize that is your attention, organization, task initiation, and persistence was another one. See, I did look this up earlier. This was in my thing to talk about.
So I think it's particularly apropos for the maker community, because a lot of us
start things and don't finish them.
Yeah. I don't have a huge list of projects that I should...
Or have a whole bin of things that you don't touch because you're not ready to deal with that yet.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to initiate the process, or you can't see all of the steps yet, or once you've used it up, then that piece is gone and you'll never get it back.
Yep.
Or you've seen it used one way and you're inflexible to using it in any other way.
Also, another very true thing is a lot of people who have that, especially more severe executive functioning disorders like autism. So when you get a higher level executive functioning disorder like autism, you get this fixed mindset into how things operate. Like you've been demonstrated a task, and that is how the task has to be completed. There's no variation on it. Can think of many people in our experience who have that problem, but internet commenters are very much that way.
Oh yeah.
Like you get to the comment on a tool demonstration or a technique demonstration and something that you're doing, and you'll see a whole bunch of comments. Well, so and so does it this way. That's the way you're supposed to do it, or whatever, right? So basically, everybody on the internet's autistic. Just to take away from
No,
that.
no, because autism encompasses a whole other host of things. I think a lot of us so task initiation means starting right away. It includes
Yeah.
not procrastinating, even when it's a less desired task, like starting homework or doing dishes. And so a lot of people on the spectrum have other things that go with that, making task initiation very difficult. Skills with task initiation are critical because they are one of the initial steps to actually getting up and starting a job, right? So I think when you're thinking about these things and what we're talking about, and people in the maker community, lots of us struggle with that ability to just get up and do it. So if you can sit back and analyze in yourself, like what is stopping you? What are your holdbacks, right?
Yeah.
Is it that lack of dopamine to fold socks because it's not very fun to do, which is initially what I think that you thought my thing with not folding socks was. But what is my real thing with not folding socks? Socks are disgusting, and I don't want to touch them, even though they're clean.
So very true.
Right? So there's those things that you don't even realize might be stopping you from doing that step. And it could be lack of pre-planning. It could be lack of flexibility with the thing that you're working with. It could be a lot of people struggle with that like something's coming up, so I can't start this because this thing's going to be happening 6 hours from now, but I can't start this because of that thing.
Yes, you're fixated on things in the future,
Yeah.
or you have anxiety of
Mm-hmm.
the inability to complete or do the task correctly. I mean, we've talked about perfectionism in the past, and perfectionism can absolutely play into that as well.
Yeah, well, and I think attention plays into it too, right? Like if you struggle to focus and pay attention to something, it's difficult to initiate starting it because you're already thinking of something else that is now more exciting than that thing.
Yeah.
Right. And to some extent, I think in the thing that we were talking about, you can see it in an older generation than us that doesn't necessarily believe in labeling things. That task initiation problem comes in with hoarding and behaviors that are connected to hoarding.
Yeah.
And generationally you see that through, and I mean there's lots of factors, and I'm not saying that's the only thing and blah blah blah, right? Like there's lots of things that cause that, but you do see that in that situation. Well, I'm going to get this because I'm going to do this thing. But if you never do that thing, then what's the point of having it?
Yeah. And conversely, you end up with you have the thing, and you've had the thing for a long time, and the thing's worn out, and you need to get rid of the thing. But
you never actually did the thing you were going to do with it.
Or even if you did do the thing,
yeah,
you have the leftover garbage that then sits in the corner and piles up on the deck or whatever until it becomes overwhelming, and then you avoid it and go on to the next. Right.
Well, and I think honestly, like having not grown up on a farm, but growing up rurally, farmers are a great example of initiation problems, right? And because in so many of these things, the executive function is more than just that. So you're spending your time running from fire to fire to fire, and you're never actually working on what you want to be working on because you haven't put systems and strategies in place that somebody who is not struggling with executive functioning has. And when those systems are in place and things are running automatically, it frees you up to do those things that you need to do.
Yeah.
Right. But as long as you're living in a panic zone all the time, and some of that comes from generational trauma, because that's the way that you learn to do things from your parents, who learn to do it from their parents, who learn to do it from their parents, right? Like, and so there's so many factors in this, but it also flows out into like so many aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And it affects not just you, but everyone in your circle of influence, really, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I keep thinking about the great philosopher Patrick F. McManus, and his story about sequences.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and talks about going fishing with his stepfather, but his stepfather says, "Well, first we have to do this, and then we'll go fishing." But then there's another sequence that has to be done before you can do the first thing, and so then you end up you get to this beginning of the task, and there's so many things that have to be done before you can actually do the task that you just give up and go fishing instead.
So, yes, and I'm going to say my point because I'm going to lose it. Do you not think that it all ties into a lack of self-reflection?
That's what I was going to kind of say as a wrap up for this particular episode. This is going to be a shorter one, but that's where mindfulness is important, and not mindfulness in the sense of sitting with your legs crossed and your fingers in the little
There's
circle.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I'm not saying that there is. I'm not saying that there is, but that's not that's not the only way to be mindful, right? Like the mindfulness, like you said, is self-reflection as well. It's taking some time to identify, I need to get this task, but I don't want to do it, or whatever it is, whether it's a creative task or a chore. It's taking a moment and thinking about why you're not able to initiate it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's what you need to do to get over that lack of capacity to initiate. Other times there's other things, but it really does start with that mindfulness moment, I guess.
So I was thinking a little bit differently. I was thinking more of self-reflection at the end of the day, where you can look back and say, like, these patterns of behavior are not getting me to where I want to go. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I do, yeah. I do think like the mindfulness stuff is part of that. But thinking of like your ability to look at your actions throughout the day and to exhibit self-control in the form of these things aren't getting done. Mm-hmm. How do I change so I can get them done?
Yeah, and that's where,
and that's like growth mindset and all those kinds of things are super important. But until you're at that place, then you're mentally able to look like almost at yourself from outside yourself. It's very different, very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, that's where, like I said, mindfulness isn't just the sitting with your legs crossed, right? And it isn't just stopping and box breathing, for example. Mm-hmm. When you're at the moment of stress, taking that 2 seconds or 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to do a series of deep breath type of things. But it is also at the end of the day taking and writing down your thoughts and your inspirations or whatever in your journal or diary, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And keeping a mindfulness record, and then occasionally reviewing it too.
One of the things I used to do when I was teaching was, at the end of the day, we would do 3 stars and a wish. 3 things that we thought we'd done well and had gone well, and then a wish for the next day. And I think part of that reflection time needs to be also being like, hey, this worked really well for me. And to emphasize more of that positive, and then be like, oh, but this isn't serving, I'm not getting through to this, I'm not initiating these tasks that need to be done, or whatever it is. But don't forget to give yourself like a positive reinforcement as well.
And give yourself grace when you fail.
Yeah.
It's all. But
I think that's where when you're consistently self-reflecting, you're not seeing growth as failure anymore, right? Because
Yeah.
failure is growing, it's learning for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And when you start to see it as that, then it changes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Good thoughts.
good luck with life this week.
Yes. And this is something that we are now both working on and involved in, right? Like I'm doing clinical psychology. You are now doing your master's in autism
Special education.
and special education. So not, I mean, your master's isn't just going to be uh, how to teach autistic students in school, right?
No.
I think your master's is going to be how to teach people with autism and other
Yeah, and it's also
neurodivergence,
about
executive functioning disorder type of things, how to manage their life and deal with things and strategies and things to move forward with their lives, right?
yeah, so part of the program, part of the reason I chose this program was because it talked about the courses that I could take are also going to be in life skills and how to move on so people continue to have fulfilling lives and aren't just stuck in their parents' basement and then in group home till they die, right? Like, it's about teaching those executive functioning skills and those things. I was listening to part of my lecture this week was an interview with Temple Grandin, and she was talking about manners and how important things like learning manners and learning to be on time for a job and to all of those things that seem to be going by the wayside are affecting these kids' abilities to function in society. A lot of kids can function in society if they were taught those social skills. And again, but I think that ties back into a lack of the parents' ability to do that because they didn't necessarily get it and schools aren't doing it. And so then these kids are being left, right? And that ties into the maker community of what's going to happen when there's nobody left to do these skills anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And she talks about that in her speech that I listened to, like what's going to happen when, I can't remember which kids she said, but she's talking about like these autistic kids. And she's like, and they're not ending up in Silicon Valley where they belong. Like, but it's true. They're not, because they're not able to function well enough to get through anymore.
Yeah.
And that's scary. And they're not becoming the artists and the musicians and all of these specialist people, these amazingly talented woodworkers, these, like all of that stuff. We're losing artisans and craftsmen who have that autistic brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all down to like basic things that we could be teaching and we could be helping, but it is work.
So it comes down to mentorship too, then.
Yes,
right?
That was actually the next part of the video we talked about.
Yeah.
Mentorship is super important.
Mentorship and community.
Yep.
So if you are somebody who has, perfect executive functioning skills and you're really successful and you're great,
send us an email because we'd like to meet you.
Yeah, we'd like to get you on and talk about how you do things. But reach out to somebody that you see having difficulties, and let them know.
Like the neighbor kid, hey, do you want to, talk to them about what you're doing? Sit on your front porch.
Yeah. And conversely, if you are somebody who needs some mentorship or some poking and prodding along the way, this is becoming our business, right? This is becoming what we're doing. So reach out to us, and we can maybe give you some pointers and some research and some initial guidance.
Well, something we were talking about today was it's too bad that COVID ruined a lot of like schools and stuff that used to be able to go into the senior centers and make contacts and stuff with that. But I think there's a lot of programs and there's a lot of seniors who have amazing skills. If we could start connecting them to people in the maker community or to kids coming up and seeing those things, it would be amazing. And I think we'd see society shift.
Yeah.
From me-centered to back to Community centered.
So if you have any questions or you just want to reach out and get in contact with us, reach out via social media. Hatchmated is mine, at Hatchmated on Instagram and everywhere else.
I have nothing because I'm scared of the internet.
Yeah, so reach out via my social media.
I'm not.
Or reach out via the email that's linked in the description of the podcast. workshoptherapypodcast@gmail.com. No, my brain's not working. Workshop Therapy Questions at workshoptherapypodcast.com. It's late at night, and we've both been working on papers, and my brain is shut down. So if you have any questions, reach out. Questions at Workshop Therapy Questions. It's in the link in the description. Just go there. It's there. I paste it into the show notes every time, and it works. Yeah. If you want to support us on Patreon, we'd really appreciate it. There's multiple tiers there. If you have anything to add, leave a review.
Every time you say that, I go through pictures of tears in my head that, like, people crying. Tears.
What, leave a review? What?
Yeah, when you say multiple tears.
Multiple tears.
And then I have to switch to tears, and so then I see cake tears, and then just tears anyway. Visual thinking.
Visual thinking, yes. There are no tears. There's no sadness. There's no sadness on Patreon. We do appreciate the support there.
Yeah, we really do.
Who are supporting us. Thank you. It does make a big difference. And yeah, questions. I'm not going to say the email because I keep messing it up.
At workshoptherapy.com.
Question. Oh, there you go. You did it. Questions at workshoptherapy.com.
Or is it gmail.com?
No, it's workshoptherapy.com. Workshop Therapy Podcast. Go to the link in the description to send an email. Don't try to copy it off of here.
Executive functioning problem.
I think at this point it's not executive functioning. I think it's just pure exhaustion. What else do we have to do?
Have a great week.
So if you found anything from this episode to be helpful and you want to reinforce it for yourself, I'd like to invite you to share it with a friend in the next 24 hours. That'll help reinforce it in your mind, and it'll help those around you, which is always a good thing. So thanks again for listening, and now I'd like to say thank you to all the amazing patrons of the Workshop Therapy Podcast. You guys make the show possible. If you're finding the show helpful and you want to support it, there are a few tiers, including a simple $1 a month option to just say thanks. For $5 a month, you can get access to the patrons only feed that has a pre-show and a post-show, in addition to the regular podcast all in one feed. You all know that the good stuff happens after the official mics are off, right? If you can't support financially, I totally understand, but I'd love it if you left a 5-star review or told a friend about the podcast. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear that as well. Send it to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com and I'll get it on the show. I want to say thank you to all the patrons of the Workshop Therapy Podcast, but especially to the founding fathers, and they are Mr. Matthew Serio from Argiano Serio, Mr. Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, Mr. Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Mr. Eric Peterson of Overall Maker Works, Mr. Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, and the one and only the Grant Alexander. So a special thank you to the founding fathers, and thank you to everybody who supports and shares the Workshop Therapy Podcast.